Well, hello and welcome, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and get us started today with our board boot camp, which is actually the first board boot camp session that we're holding of the year, which happens to be on our bonus day of the year. So happy Leap Day to everyone here, and thank you for joining us for this training. My name is Genevieve Kirk, and I am the Center for Nonprofit Excellence Director at the Community Foundation of East Central Illinois. And today's topic is Nonprofit Board Service Essentials. This is a great primer session that is going to touch on the nuts and bolts of being an effective board member. We have an hour to do this, so over the next hour, we're going to cover everything from what makes a high impact board and what steps you can take as board members and nonprofit executives to get there. We'll cover the basic roles and responsibilities of board members. What is the board's role in fundraising and community engagement? And what do we mean by constructive partnership? So whether you're a brand new board member, and thank you if you are, or perhaps a continuing board member who's looking for a refresher, or maybe you're a nonprofit leader joining us today, we hope that this session will provide you with a good refresher on essential duties of board service and hopefully give you some new tools and understanding that you can put into practice at your own organizations. And if you haven't yet had a chance to introduce yourself to the group via the chat, we invite you to do so. You can list your name and your organization name. And if there's something in particular that you're hoping to gain from our session today, feel free to put that in the chat as well. We'll be monitoring it today throughout the session. Okay, just a few housekeeping notes as we get started. First, a friendly reminder to please keep your microphone on mute during the session today. We ask that you would use the chat function to submit any questions that you have for our presenters. We will be offering a Q&A session following our presentation time, so probably the last 15 minutes or so of the hour. So please make note of your questions as they come up, and you'll be invited to voice them or put them in the chat at that time, and we'll be happy to answer them to the best of our ability. And then just a reminder that this session is being recorded for the benefit of participants who were unable to attend today's live Zoom session. So I would like to start our time today with just a brief poll. It's always helpful for us as presenters to understand who is in the audience today. So let me get this queued up. You should see this on the screen. So if you could just tell us the role that best describes me is, if you're a new nonprofit board member with less than a year of service, continuing board member, more than a year of service, board chair or president, nonprofit executive director or CEO, or if other best describes you. We'll keep this open just for a minute or two more. Okay, thank you all. I'll just leave it open for another couple seconds for anyone else who'd like to participate. Great, thank you. So I'm going to share back the results. We've got a good mixed group here today. So a lot of new nonprofit board members, about 38% of you, a good chunk of continuing board members with more than a year of service. We have 4 board chairs or presidents. Thank you for being here, and thank you for your service to your organizations, and a couple of nonprofit executive directors, CEOs, and other as well. So thank you all. That is helpful for us to know as we are sharing with you. Okay, let me walk you through our agenda today and the order in which we'll be presenting our content. So we're going to start with characteristics of a high impact board and what does that look like in your organizations. I'll be walking you through a snapshot of the nonprofit sector in East Central Illinois to provide some context for the work that you're doing. And then we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of roles and responsibility of board members. I saw in the chat there were a couple inquiries as far as how can board members engage in fundraising. So you're in luck. We're going to be covering that later in our session today, as well as community engagement. And finally, we'll be closing with just a little word about the board and CEO partnership and how essential that is for an effective board and nonprofit relationship. So we'll get to that towards the end. But allow me now to introduce you to our presenters. I'm not alone presenting this today. I have brought with me some excellent colleagues, and I'm so thankful that they are here today. We have Allison Winter, who is our new president and CEO at the Community Foundation of East Central Illinois. And I also would like to introduce you to Wesley Hunter III. He is a trustee here on our board with the Community Foundation as well. Welcome, Allison and Wes. And to start, I would like to invite both of you to just do a quick introduction of yourselves to the group. If you can tell us a bit about your professional background, your connection to the Community Foundation, and any experience that you'd like to share relevant to your work on nonprofit boards of directors. Can we start with Allison?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you for attending this meeting. I'm excited to see so many of you here. Thank you, Wes, for being one of our trustees and advocating for us here and being a good board member. My experience, well, I've been at the Community Foundation since January 2nd. So I am early in my tenure of working with non-for-profit governing boards. Prior to coming here, a lot of you know I was a fundraiser on University of Illinois campus for over 12 years, and prior to that in sales. While working on campus, one of my roles and responsibilities was to attend and recruit and somewhat manage our board members towards having a philanthropic heart beyond just their personal time and talent. So new to the governing board side of things, but really excited to talk to you about some of the experiences I've had.
Excellent. Thank you, Allison. And I'm so glad to work with you here. And next, Wes, can you introduce yourself?
My name's Wes Hunter, and so I'm new to the board for the Community Foundation, East Central Illinois. Started in my first term in July of 2023. I originally hail from Chattanooga, Tennessee, moved to Mattoon, Illinois about 4 years ago now, and professionally working on opening a board game cafe in Effingham, Illinois, moving over into hospitality sector. Before that, I was in manufacturing, running a company making pole line hardware in the Southeast. So a little bit different. It's been a great switch, and I've had some experience sort of the philanthropist side of the Community Foundation, but it's been a pleasure to jump in on the board side and learn and grow.
Thank you so much, Wes, and we so appreciate you for being willing to jump in and be here with us today and presenting from your experience as a board member. Just a little about me. Again, I'm the Center for Nonprofit Excellence Director here at the Community Foundation, where I joined our staff back in 2021. So I've been here for about 2.5 years. And in this role, I get to strengthen our local nonprofit sector by providing these kinds of trainings, resources, and capacity building for local nonprofits. Professionally, I've worked within the nonprofit sector for the last 20 years, also a little bit in government, and I have been in various leadership roles, most recently as the executive director of the Champaign Center Partnership. I have a bachelor's from the University of Chicago, and my master's is in public service with a focus on nonprofit management, which comes in handy for this work. I also do some adjunct teaching at the University of Illinois in the School of Social Work on nonprofit society, social entrepreneurship and social change, and management of human service organizations. I've been here in Champaign the last 10 years with my family, and I just think we have such a great community. So I'm delighted to be here and in this role that enables me to help you, our nonprofit sector, to do your good work even better. So thank you for being here and participating in this training. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and hand things over to Wes. He's going to get us started talking a little bit about what makes a high-performing board.
Got to unmute myself. We'll kick it off with a quote that exceptional boards add significant value to their organizations, making a discernible difference in advancing their mission. Exceptional boards make governance intentional and not incidental. We'll get into that over the next 2 slides a little bit. So some of the traits of a high-performing board is going to be full board involvement with a sense of engagement and participation. Respect for the process, but a focus on results, not getting too bogged down in the process, but also making sure that you're getting their results going. The ability to innovate, which is, I think, going to be one of the traits that's really, important to focus on when you start to bring in new people, having your ideas, having your ability to look forward and move as you grow. A strategic focus and management overreach, or reverse management overreach, and effective partnership with the chief executive, sort of acknowledging that it's a symbiotic relationship. The board's not overreaching and getting into the micromanagement, but you do that by having a strong partnership with the individuals and strong trust in the individuals that you've set up to run the organization. So some steps that you can take to reach this high performance. An initial step is term limits. And so not all boards have them, but a high functioning board typically will. Term limits can often look like a 3-year term that can be held consecutively no more than 3 times. In general, it's recommended that term limits kind of cap out to a maximum of 9 to 10 years for a board member. And that allows for there to be, in a way, a little bit of churn, fresh ideas coming in and cycling through. And for members who have been trustees and board members that are really strong, that doesn't mean that they're out and they can't be involved in the process anymore. They can be involved as advisors and advisors to the new board. They just wouldn't have a vote in that case. But it's a way to bring fresh ideas in and to not, stagnate. So competencies is another aspect. When you're selecting your board members, looking at what are the gaps that your board has and how can we address that and improve it. Sometimes you can try to say, well, this person's got a lot of sway, so I want to put them on the board because that'll help us. But do they have a skill set that helps? And as you're trying to build your board, building where you have a variety of skill sets that can help you in a variety of directions. Onboarding and mentoring is going to be another key step. Trying to not just throw people to the fire. If you want to bring in somebody that's young and energetic, but doesn't have the experience, that can be a great addition to the board. But how do you help ease that transition into an understanding of sort of roles and responsibilities, and then mentoring them as they go through the process? Board diversity and initiatives is going to be another step. And then self-assessment tools. There's some forms, some self-surveys that you can take. The Community Foundation has some resources that if you're interested, as far as doing an evaluation from the overall board perspective, and then also on an individual level as a board member, how have I done? How can I improve myself? How would I rank myself? We can go on. So some of the keys is for building a board is going to be to start with planning. And so who do you want? What roles would they fill? And how do you get to select that individual? So one of the things that the Community Foundation uses as a resource is a matrix where and this can be shared, but you break down your existing board members, their age ranges, their competencies, their areas of expertise, and you can compare that with your prospective candidates that you're targeting for recruitment, and what gaps are they filling in. And so trying to be intentional in selection of acknowledging these are our needs, and let's go see if we can get some candidates that fill those needs. And it's okay, to start with that step, and then, you know, move forward into recruitment, and how do you get them. So assessment is going to be another, to keep people engaged. How are we doing? What's people's thought on the board? Is everybody thinking? If you do that survey, do you have fours and fives across the board, or is there some areas that can be addressed? And if you're not doing some internal assessments on a consistent basis, you're not going to have that knowledge. And as if those gaps exist, that's where people can start to disengage. And some other ways that you can increase engagement is through education and experiences. Education can be formal or informal. Formal education might be some camps, such as this with a board member boot camp, and or some more specific continuing education through certifications or otherwise. But informal is just going as far as mentorship and taking and matching up an experienced board member or potentially an advisor who was a board member with a new onboarding, and to help guide them and understand the process. One of the things that happened with me when I joined the community foundation is I stepped into the grant committee. And so we have an annual process where there's some grants that can be applied on. And I was part of the selection committee for who received those, which is a horrible job. It's not fun to be the decider and to pick between really close, but you have to choose one. But so there was, I'm new, and so it's nice to have the opportunity to be involved and engaged in that. But we had some people that had been on the board previously, so we have some new ideas. But then there's also that time of you got to turn to somebody and say, well, how have we done this in the past? What have we used as our criteria in the past? Because having some of that experience, that guidance of the consistency of what the organization's doing, and then allowing you to make your decisions within that framework that only exists because there is some of that knowledge and experience in the past. So it's important to have the whole. You want the new and the new ideas, but then also maintaining your consistency and learning and from others, and that comes through mentorship and working together. So engagement activities can, there's certainly things that you can do to keep people tied in, but they can be simple. They don't have to be, trust fall exercises necessarily, but as simple as where your meeting locations. Are you, if they're varied, that can be something that can be nice, but it's also, if they're varied, is there something that can be done as a team before or after, whether optional or not. But if you're meeting at a coffee shop, do people stay around and talk to each other after the meeting's over? And it can go into a little bit more of maybe do an escape room together, or something along that as a team building exercise. And I personally am an advocate for escape rooms, I will say. There's nothing more interesting in learning how people think through problems than locking everyone in a room with each other and having to come up to a solution. I've seen some interesting stuff. My family did it, and half the family formed an ad hoc committee in the middle of the room where they had to bring everything into the committee to make a decision. And it was fascinating. So, but yeah, I think those are some good steps. There's resources that the Community Foundation has as far as self-assessment tools and planning tools with some matrix. If that's something you're interested in, certainly reach out, and Allison or Genevieve could help.
Thank you so much, Wes. And you are really modeling what an engaged board member looks like by being here and sharing this information. We just really appreciate you doing this and everything that you've shared with us. And yes, on that note, if you registered for this and you're attending today, you will get a copy both of today's slide deck as well as that board recruitment matrix that Wes referenced. And we also have a good board self-evaluation form that I will also send out by email, and hopefully those can be tools that will help you in your board efforts. So I'm going to go ahead and move us along to share for the next few minutes about kind of some broad context of the unique role of the nonprofit sector in East Central Illinois. And I want to clarify, when I'm talking about East Central Illinois, these are the counties that I'm referring to. They happen to be our service area with the Community Foundation, which includes Champaign, Ford, Iroquois, Vermilion, Douglas, Edgar, Coles, Moultrie, and Piatt counties. So why am I talking about this? Well, I find it really helpful for new and continuing board members to just have an understanding of who are all the nonprofits that are serving this area that we're located in. What are the needs that are being expressed in this area? Who's doing what, et cetera. So that's what I'm going to be sharing with you today. And to start off, I've got another little poll I'd love for you to take. This is completely going to be a guesstimate for you. So if you had to guess or estimate, how many nonprofits do you think are in East Central Illinois? So in those counties that I listed, what would you state? 87. I'm talking about 501c3s, by the way. 317, 550, 879, over 2,000. Just put down your best guess here, and then I'll tell you. Okay, I'll leave this open just for a couple more seconds, and thank you for jumping in and participating. We appreciate that. Okay, so I'm sharing back the results, and for those of you who responded over 2,000, you are correct. Can you believe it? That's a lot. So for those of you who did the smaller categories, you might be surprised to know that we actually have over 2,000 501c3s in our service area. Let me show you the charts. So some of this is research that I did with a great action learning class through the University of Illinois Geese College of Business. And this information comes from the IRS Form 990s, which is the annual information return that each 501c3 is required to fill out each year. So yes, as you can see down at the bottom, there are, and this was based on 2021 data, I believe, 2,053 501c3s in East Central Illinois. So of those, 92% or almost 1,900 are public charities. And so these are nonprofits that are funded by a variety of sources. They tend to provide those direct services to the public. So under IRS rules, to get that tax exemption, that's going to be charitable, religious, scientific, literary, testing for public safety, fostering national or international amateur sports competition, or preventing the cruelty, prevention of cruelty to children or animals. Those are exempt purposes. That's the IRS that sets what qualifies as exemption. Now, the other 159 501c3s are considered private foundations. So those are funded by individuals, families, or other donors. They are also 501c3s, but unlike the public charities, which is the big part of the pie there, they are not actually providing direct services themselves, but they essentially fund other organizations that are providing those services. Over on the left, you can see, if you're interested in a breakdown of the count of public charities by county, Champaign County, not surprisingly, has the most with 879, followed by Vermilion, and then Coles County. So this will just give you a sense of, I think, main takeaway here. There are a lot of nonprofits in our area, and I think it's helpful to know who is doing what as you're as board members helping to oversee the mission of your nonprofit organization. And here, if you're curious, like, well, is this growing? Is it shrinking? Where does it stand? You can see there is growth in the number of nonprofits over the last 10 years. This chart here mirrors what we see on a national level, that despite economic downturns that have occurred over that period, the nonprofit sector within East Central Illinois continues to grow at a pretty healthy rate. We had 22% growth from 2012 up to 2021. So the sector is healthy, it is growing, it is vibrant. And in terms of what are all these organizations doing? So the majority are human service organizations. So these are everything from after-school care programs to job development services. So some examples of local nonprofits you probably know about that are human service organizations, that would be Eastern Illinois Food Bank and Developmental Services Center. Now, religion-related nonprofits, that comprises the next biggest section of the pie. These are churches, synagogues, mosques, other places of worship that qualify for tax exemption based on their religious purpose. So examples would be CU Christian Church, Sinai Temple. The very smallest section of the pie here are organizations that are doing international or foreign affairs. So these are providing humanitarian aid and exploring policy development in foreign countries. But big takeaway here is just that we have, under the broad term nonprofit, there are a lot of diversity in terms of who is working on what, and the range of needs that is expressed in our community are being met by these charitable organizations. And then my final slide just for this section is to let you know that most nonprofits, even though we have a large amount, over 2,000, most of these are very small organizations in terms of revenue size. So you can see 65% of public charities in East Central Illinois, they're operating with annual revenues of $25,000 or less. So they're small organizations. Maybe some of you here today are working for small volunteer-run organizations. On the other hand, what's kind of interesting is that for healthcare organizations, even though they comprise just a small little portion, 5% of the total count of nonprofits, they make up 75% of the nonprofit revenue in our service area. So these are large healthcare institutions generally that provide services in East Central Illinois. So while we're talking about money and revenue with organizations, I just want to share that when we say nonprofit, oftentimes that can be a big misnomer, in that some board members or just members of the public might think, oh, nonprofit, well, they can't make a profit. And I want you to know that just because the organization is called a nonprofit, they can make a profit. The difference is, unlike a for-profit corporation, any profit that is made at the end of the year cannot go back to shareholders or be distributed to shareholders. It has to be reinvested into the organization in general. So board members, just have that in mind as you're looking at those monthly financial statements. Yeah, just be in a position to know that you are uniquely positioned to help your organization be in a healthy financial state. And we would love to see more organizations with healthy revenue streams and a diversity of revenue streams. So hopefully that gives you a little understanding of the nonprofit sector in general in our service area. I'm now going to just zoom in onto board roles and responsibilities. And this content, this quote, similar to the one that Wes read earlier, it's from a nonprofit, surprise, surprise, based in Washington, D.C. called boardsource.org. They have fantastic materials, handouts. I use a lot of their content in the training that I do. I encourage you to take a look at some of their materials. And it sounds really basic, but one of the fundamental challenges that a lot of boards have is that their board members just don't understand or don't have a strong understanding of what is it essentially that they were brought onto the board to do. What are their roles and responsibilities? And BoardSource did a recent, put out a report recently that said a lot of board members, they understand the internal things like what is the organization's mission and providing a financial oversight. But some of those external pieces, like what am I supposed to do with fundraising or advocacy or community building or outreach, they're not as well versed in those. So what I'm hoping to share with you today will give you a broad sense of all of those roles and responsibilities in detail, so that you can be better equipped in the work that you're doing. But I don't like to just talk. I want to invite you all to participate as well. So this is your chance to participate in our training today. I'm going to pause and just ask this open-ended question. What do you think are attributes of good board members? Or in other words, you can fill in this blank, and I invite you to do this in the chat. So good board members should be able to fill in the blank. I invite you to just type a quick response in the chat. If you're feeling brave, you can unmute yourself and just share what comes top of mind for good board members. I'm seeing some things come in the chat. Let me just summarize. I'm seeing listening, working constructively, thinking more strategically than operationally, articulating the mission, yes, making introductions to other folks in their network, yes, speaking about the organization. I love that, with passion to convince others, yes. Following through, oh yes, please don't just sign up for a task, but actually go through. Thinking long-term, ability to communicate, think outside the box. Okay, you all are doing great. Thank you so much. You have hit on many of the main ones that I wanted to articulate here. I presented this at Cunningham Children's Home yesterday, and someone said, come to the meetings. Yes, please. But I also would say, don't just come to the meetings, but make sure that you're prepared for the meeting. Please, please, please read the board minutes from last month. Please, please read the agenda, know what's coming up, look at the financial statements, be prepared, help open doors in the community. You all have hit on so many that I would put in my list as well. So thank you for that participation. I'm just going to walk us through, when I think about sort of the three primary responsibilities of the board, I would put them into these three pots. So the first one being, you as board members are establishing the direction of your organization, that strategic direction, which is going to be, of course, in alignment with your organization's stated mission and purpose. Many organizations will go through the process of strategic planning. And if you haven't, guess what? We're doing a session on it in April that we invite you to attend at Champaign Public Library if you want to hear more about that process. But figuring out and establishing and making sure that direction is being followed, I'd say, is primary responsibility one. The second would be ensuring resources. So these, of course, are financial resources, that you have those finances needed to be able to do the mission work. But we also here are talking about human capital. So do you have the correct staffing and at the right levels to carry out your mission? And third, this is probably where most of you are at as well, in terms of thinking about some of the governance duties. So providing oversight and assuring compliance with the important laws and regulatory agencies that are undertaking that tax exemption. For example, you do not want to lose your tax exemption as a 501c3. So I'm going to talk about these in a little detail just as we're going through this training. So these are general expectations of board members, and I'm going to walk us through this little semicircle, starting on the left with advancing the organization's mission. So as board members, you are charged with developing and maintaining the focus on your organization's mission statement as well as its vision statement. So as we talked about, this includes establishing what that strategic direction is. As board members, you're articulating, you're safeguarding, and you're modeling and promoting organizational values. And I won't put anyone on the spot, but I would challenge you. Can you state what your organization's values are? Can you state the organization's mission statement? Usually mission statement people know, but those values, have you gone through that exercise as a board? Do you know those top of mind? Yesterday with Cunningham, actually one of their board members did, and I was so happy to hear that. So know those, and if you haven't gone through that process, that would be a great tool or exercise to go through at a board meeting. Part of advancing the mission also means, as we talked about, that that your organization has the resources that it needs in order to fulfill its mission or advance its mission. So bottom line here, as board members, expect that you will engage in your organization's fundraising process. And I would set the expectation that you likely will make your own contribution to the organization. And I'm able to say that because I'm not your executive director, but executive directors would love for me to say that because it's true. Here at the Community Foundation, we aim to hit 100% giving by all of our members of trustees. And again, that dollar amount varies, but a personally meaningful contribution is a general expectation of board members. Okay, let's talk about fulfilling legal and fiduciary responsibilities. So you as board members are called fiduciaries because you're legally responsible for managing the nonprofit entity's asset according to state and common law. So as a board, you should have established financial policies and ensure accountability with said policies. And you're ensuring compliance as well with applicable laws and ethical standards. So if you haven't recently, I would just encourage you to look back at your organization's articles of incorporation, your bylaws, and make sure you're reviewing annual financial statements and your audit report. It's best practice for the board to look at these and do a review on them. Usually once a year, it could be every other year, just to make sure, are these up to date? Are there any edits that need to be made? Are we in compliance with our own bylaws? Because if not, maybe there could be some amendments that you would want to make as a board and approve those at an upcoming meeting. Okay, third on our little semicircle here is coming prepared to board meetings. And I think just the general expectation here is what I said earlier. Please read the packet in advance. Know what's going to be talked about so that you are coming engaged to prepare to ask good questions. And for those of you who are new, I find that sometimes newer board members don't like to speak up as much. And I would encourage you, you're in the position where you can ask the dumb or naive questions. Please, no question is dumb or naive. In fact, by asking those questions, you are doing a service to others on your board because you're saying something that maybe others aren't willing to bring up, but it helps everyone for those basic questions to be asked. So no question is a bad one. And then at the top of our semicircle, you as the board, if there is ever a vacancy with your chief executive, it would be your duty as a board to hire that individual. And recently we went through this process at the Community Foundation. So our new president and CEO was hired by our board of trustees, and they had a whole process this last fall. So that would be, for some boards, that might be the most important duty that you do during your tenure as a board member would be to select that individual. And then with oversee, generally there's an annual review that's expected of the chief executive, and you as the board, and this looks different for every organization, would be responsible for conducting that review. Yeah, I would also state here, actually someone brought this up recently as well. Board members, it's great if you think of yourselves as in the balcony. You know, you're kind of up there, you're looking at what's going on the dance floor or the stage, but really who's engaging on the stage or on that dance floor, and that would be your chief executive and your chief executive's team. Sometimes I've seen in organizations where those lines get a little blurred and it can become tricky. And so I would just encourage you to just keep that sort of vision in mind in your governance. And then thinking about your time on the board, you are ideally a limited time resource if you have term limits like Wes mentioned. In fact, if any of you want to do a thumbs up, using the emoji thumbs up, if you have term limits, go ahead and do that now. I'd be interested to know who has term limits. Thumbs up if you do. And that would be a good thing. I would give you a thumbs up for that because that's a best practice. But I'd be encouraging you when it's time for new board members to come on board, like whose job is it to get new board members? It is the board who should be recruiting exceptional new board members. Now, this often happens in partnership with your chief executive, but please don't expect your chief executive to get all your new board members. It should really come from within the board, oftentimes through a nominating committee. And I'd encourage you, I will send you out that board matrix to be thinking about, which competencies and skills and diversity do you already have on your board? And as those folks are shifting off with it, when their term comes to an end, what are the gaps you're going to have? And how can you strategically be thinking about how to fill those gaps with people in your networks? But that would be a very important expectation of board members, is that you're actively involved in replacing yourselves when your time on the board comes to an end. Using sufficient communication tools, so you as board members should have access and sharing files for all of those things that I mentioned earlier: financial statements, bylaws, articles of incorporation. Hopefully you have great platforms in place for your meetings, whether they're held in person or online. And then last on our little semicircle here is serving on committees. And I would also add volunteering for your organization outside of your very important role being on the board of directors. Here at the Community Foundation, our board members, as Wes mentioned, have served on grant review committees, scholarship review committees. I have some board members who are mentoring new and emerging nonprofit founders through our Community Solutions Incubator. We have other board members that will come to these trainings and help present content, like Wes. Thank you, Wes, for being here again. So these are all great ways for you to get some day-to-day operations experience to better understand how the organization is actually functioning. And that just better equips you when you go back to the boardroom to have that information at the ready as you're engaging in discussion. Okay, and now I'm going to move us into talking about briefly the 3 fiduciary duties of board members. We have the duty of care, the duty of loyalty, and the duty of obedience. So just as for any corporation,
do you
the
just
board
need
of
to give individual
directors,
information about it, or do you already kind of?
sorry there, the board of directors has 3 primary legal duties, so known as the duty of care, loyalty, and obedience. So just know that you as board members, legally speaking, should be meeting certain standards of conduct and attention in carrying out your responsibility to the organization. So let me just explain this and break it down to you one by one. We'll start with the duty of care. So here, the important thing is that you as board members are taking care of the nonprofit by ensuring prudent use of all assets, including the facility, the location, the people, and the goodwill of the organization. So yes, you need to be acting with care. And the ways that you can do this, if you're attending board meetings regularly, if you're showing independent judgment, making sure that you're informed and relying on trustworthy information, delegating appropriately. Someone mentioned in the chat, following up regularly. Yes, thank you. Those are all ways, if you're doing those things, you are likely undertaking the duty of care. Good job. Next is the duty of loyalty. And here the important word is loyalty, or allegiance to the organization above yourself. So ensuring that the nonprofit's activities and its transactions are first and foremost advancing the mission of the organization. If there is any conflict of interest, and that can happen at times, that's actually okay as long as it's disclosed ahead of time. We have a conflict of interest policy that all of our board members and staff sign. That would be another good best practice. Email me if you need a copy of that if you don't have that at your organization. So common breaches that happen with this would be if a board member takes personal advantage of information obtained within confidential board meetings, use of organization property or assets for personal gain. Those are no-nos. And so we just need to make sure that our loyalty as board members is going towards the organization when making decisions. And last, we've got the duty of obedience. And here we're just ensuring that the organization remains obedient to its central purpose, and that it's adhering to what it's spelled out to do in its articles of incorporation, its bylaws, and other governing documents. And this is just important because if a donor is investing money or resources into the organization, they're relying on the stated mission and purpose of the organization. They want to make sure that their gift will be used appropriately. So you as board members, ensuring that the organization remains obedient to its central purpose, you are fulfilling that duty of obedience. So thank you for sticking with me on all of that. I know there might be some questions. We will get to that shortly, but I'm going to pass the baton over to Allison to talk a little bit more about board members and fundraising.
I'm sure these are the slides that all of you board members tuned in for. How can you participate and help fundraise for your organization? Because I know this is a special heart for everyone, right? When Genevieve asked me to talk about this, I've been on a couple boards where they did not have an obligation to donate back to the organization. There was no expectation that you would contribute back to the organization. And that can be challenging because then what is it that the board is going to do? So as Genevieve mentioned, we do strive for 100% participation from our trustees here. And in fact, we do that so that as we look at the grants, folks who are applying to receive funding, our committee actually asks back to that organization, do you have 100% support from your own board who are also putting their money where their mouth is when they talk about how important this organization is. So as Genevieve mentioned earlier, having each board member trustee consider who they're serving as one of their top 3 priorities in giving. They should give something that's of a financial significant to them personally. There are boards that exist out there that require, I don't know, like a $5,000 minimum to be a part of that board annually. Not necessary for a lot of the nonprofits, right? Like Genevieve just presented, we have thousands in the state of Illinois. Whatever is personally significant for the folks serving in that trustee or position, an annual contribution, we would want to expect that. And then the next slide, we'll talk about a little more about how can you be very hand in hand with your development officer, your executive director, what you can do to fundraise or just engage in the community. I have so many thoughts on all of these boxes, so stop me when the time comes, Genevieve. I got to taking notes and I got excited. So one, you could serve on the development committee. I've certainly been a part of different organizations where the board hadn't been asked to fundraise before, but now there was a campaign coming up, and participating in how the fundraising happens, the questions that your chief development officer likes to ask. I had a colleague at the 4-H Foundation who taught all of her board members how she would do initial meetings. Just when your frontline fundraiser goes and talks to a prospect for the first time, here are the 3 or 4 things I always ask. Why are you connected to the community foundation? How have you engaged with us in the past? What philanthropies do you usually support? You know, are we one of them, or are there other like-minded organizations you like to support? Who else makes these kind of decisions? When you're thinking about engaging, are you thinking about being a volunteer, just a well-informed advocate, or would you be willing to consider donating or creating a fund here at the community foundation? So my colleague taught her board members to do this, and they started sending back names of people that they had met with that said, no, I'd just like to volunteer, and others who said, yes, I'd like to discuss in further depth how I can make a personal philanthropic contribution. And then that executive director would go and follow up with them directly. So that's a really awesome way to get involved. Introducing staff to prospective donors. We kind of talked about this just a little bit in terms of you serving on those boards. You're coming individually with your own network. And Genevieve mentioned our organization serves 9 different counties. Of the 9 counties we've served, I have contacts in 3 of them from a personal familial perspective. But having somebody like Wes, who's really in our furthest southern area that we touch, super helpful to have him on our board so he can open some of those doors to us. I had a couple of notes on that particular one. Oh, my board chair also reminds our board members repeatedly throughout the year that we're meeting, don't forget to introduce Allison to people, and the board members, to somebody else's point, follow up regularly, right? So I've had a couple of people just since our last board meeting say, Allison, I've got 3 people in mind that I want to make sure are on your radar that I'd like to make sure that you're connected to. Inviting friends and associates to events. This is an easy passive one for folks who may not be as comfortable being on the development committee and asking some of these qualifying questions, so to speak. Ask your friend, ask your neighbor, ask your business partner to come with you to an event for that your organization is hosting. Setting up the face-to-face meetings, again, that can be easy if you're comfortable making those introductions. Just as an introduction, your executive director doesn't have to talk about the money part in front of you. I've certainly worked with department heads on campus who are very uncomfortable making asks. That's fine. We can have that one-on-one conversation with each board member and say, what's your personal comfort level here? If this is, you just want to introduce me to somebody so I can start a relationship with them, perfect. Or if you want to be a part of this next box on the next line down says adding a board member's signature to a solicitation or invitation, a peer-to-peer ask is really valuable. It hits different when it comes from your friend versus when it comes from that frontline fundraiser. So plenty of times I would have a board member who said, no, this is my neighbor, my friend. I see them all the time. I don't want to ask them for money. Perfect. I'll be that person and we will never have you as a part of it, but you've opened the door. Other times, depending on what your connection is to the community, seeing your name turns people's heads and say, oh, Wes is committed to that. Well, Wes is one of my favorite humans in the whole world. I see his name on something and I know that has a stamp of approval. I want to invest in that too. So again, a little bit more of a passive way to do it. Hosting some small group events at your home, sponsoring them in the community, sponsoring them at your place of work. This can be super helpful in bringing people together. People will come to a unique location. Maybe where you work has like a really great atrium that you could host a little cocktail hour in. Maybe one of your board members has an awesome house. Ford County has Bales Lake, which can be a really cool place to go and spend time on a patio, a little unique to Central Illinois. Allow your board members to shine and just play host, bring the people together. Sometimes people are like, well, I don't have a great space, but I'd be happy to pay for the catering for that. All of that puts your executive director, your nonprofit in a position to have an audience of people in a unique location. So that's super helpful. Sending the personalized thank you notes, having board members just sign acknowledgement letters and say, so great to receive this. We've been putting this to use in the grant. Then there's another name on it. It's not always the same people you're hearing from the community foundation, but again, signaling to the community, there are lots of people that you might recognize their names. Our board chair might sign something and that hits somebody's desk and they say, I didn't realize Mark was on that board, or I didn't know that Wes has been in service there. And it just kind of wakes up folks' network again. And then in speaking publicly about your giving, maybe letting the organization do an interview with you, quoting you in your local publications, doing a feature highlight on your social media. Again, just adds visibility. You can do semi-simple signals to the community around you. If you work in an office setting and you have a cubicle and you can put up an invitation that came in the mail to you, or, I know the Eastern Illinois Food Bank, they have a silver spoon with a bite out of it. If you wear that on your lapel, wearing your organization's branding just passively around so that people can ask another question about it and allow you to amplify and advocate for the organization is super, super helpful. There was a post and a question in our Center for Nonprofit Excellence Facebook group early last week or over last weekend. Having your board members host the table at galas or at your own organization's event, helping the board members know what to talk about at the table, how they can create table conversation with folks they know or they don't know. Oh, sorry, food bank, you probably don't have the spoon anymore, but my dad still wears it, so he'll still talk about you. That's no problem. What other notes did I have on here? Helping our board members as executive directors have intentional conversations with how they can partner back with the organization. So again, if you're going to an event together, if you're hosting an event and you have a board member seated at each of the tables, letting those board members know what the main talking points are. And again, going back to knowing your values and your mission statement to advocate and remind people, why did we come together and what is our hope for these folks to engage with us further? Okay, I think I covered everything on that one. So we can move to the next slide about construction partnerships, right? So I'm gonna move my screen over here so I can read this better, but exceptional boards govern in constructive partnership with the chief executive, recognizing the effectiveness of the board and chief executive are interdependent. They build this partnership through trust, candor, respect, and honest communication. So Genevieve mentioned a lot of times a board may have to replace their executive director, their chief executive. Yes, it can be a top-down matrix of reporting structure, but really if you can turn it vertically, having a partnership where there's trust with the board and the chair of the board with what the chief executive is doing every month. Building that trust so there's not an imbalance of information, so that there's a constant feedback loop going to the board so that the board knows, hey, Allison's been doing this. She's met with these kind of people. Here are the follow-up calls she made from the last meeting. I think a couple months ago, Chad Hoffman had talked about he sends a weekly or maybe a bi-weekly email back to his board just to touch base and say, hey, work is continuing. Even though I see you but once a month, work continues and the good things happening are continuing to happen as we know they will. I shared that this is a new role for me. My past boards have not been fiduciary responsibility kind of boards. They've not been governing boards. So as I took this role, I took it very seriously to interview with the CEO and our ex officio and understand who they are as people and what their expectations as managers were, which is why I was really grateful and happy to join this organization, because we do have a really great board that cares a lot, that does show up when we put out a call to ask them to come help us staff the office over the holidays. We had a ton of people that were willing to come and work in the office and see what our day-to-day looked like in here. It's really important to build that transparency. When things come up, I'm sharing news. If it's good, bad, or indifferent, if there's a question that they've asked, getting that feedback back to them. I meet with my board chair monthly before we have our monthly board meeting, which is really important to me. But again, sending something even in between those meetings to the broader group. I should probably stop talking. As I told Genevieve, I get really excited about how you all can partner, especially in the fundraising side. So I'll stop and we can look at the questions.
Thank you so much, Allison. Yeah, we just have a couple minutes left, and there's one question in the chat that I think actually will probably go to you, Allison. Is there an easy fundraising task that a board member can start with if they're uncomfortable with fundraising?
Sure. Talk to your executive director about how they see you helping. So if you're uncomfortable with the fundraising side, be sure that the executive director knows it, so they're not asking you to be the person that says that to provide them with all the names. But maybe you're the person that has a few connections. You're like, I don't know, so-and-so might be interested in learning more about this. Can I give you their email address? Sure, that's an easy thing. Or attending the event and just sitting at the table and advocating, knowing the 3 talking points about the things that are going on at your organization. That's a very easy thing to do, where you're just the advocate. You're not the person asking, but you are sharing some of those bullet points of why our organization is so awesome and what we plan to do with this next campaign and why it's important now. I hope that's helpful. You bet.
Any other questions that you all have in our last couple of minutes? Feel free to put them in the chat, or if you're feeling brave, you can unmute and voice your question.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So I have a advisory board. I'm a regional portion of a national organization. And so it's not a governing board, it's an advisory board. But when it was set up about 4 years ago, terms were not part of the setup. So I'm trying to figure out, how do I go about implementing board terms and kind of restructuring how we operate?
That is a great question, and I would begin that conversation with your board chair. I'm not sure if you have that structure with your advisory board, where you have a chair that you work with.
I do have a chair, and we've been talking, but I don't know that they have a great thought on that either. Like, we both know it needs to happen, but we're trying to figure out how to properly implement it.
to do it. Yes. Well, I think first building that consensus with your board chair and then among the rest of your board would be an important first step. As far as actually implementing the change, that's sort of the easier part. That's just literally revising your bylaws to include a statement on term limits. And if you're interested in seeing an example of how that could be worded, just email us info@cfeci.org, and we'd be happy to provide you with a template of bylaws. But it really starts with that consensus building piece. If your board members just need a little education as to why term limits are important, I'm sure I can find you an article or two, probably from the National Council of Nonprofits, on why that's a best practice. I think sometimes hearing it from an outside source or reading it in an article written by scholars has a lot of weight. And so that could be a good tool for you as you begin the conversation. Does that help answer your question?
It does. And I'll reach out to you. Thank you.
Okay, great. You are most welcome.
One-
Well, it is, any other questions?
I was kind of going to jump in a little bit
Oh, thank
on
you. Yes.
that. One thing that is helpful for me is that the term limits for the community foundation are staggered. So the entire board doesn't rotate at once. It's, I think, approximately a third or so. So there's a little bit of a churn of like new people coming in, but you're not just vacating your entire board all at once and having to turn everything over. So that I imagine could be a challenging conversation of like which third of us is going to stagger. But you could, that's one thing to consider, is that if you set up term limits, try to set it up to where it's not just everyone goes at once.
That's exactly where we're stuck. Yeah.
Okay.
Good. Anyways,
I would love to have an offline conversation with both of you guys. That would be really helpful.
Absolutely. Glad to do that. Please reach out by email and we can schedule that. And good point, Wes. Yes, you never want your entire board to roll off all at once. Okay, let me just make sure. I saw some other thing popped up in the chat. I want to make sure. Yes, there will be a recording of this Zoom session, which will be posted shortly on our YouTube channel. So we invite you to, go back to that, share it maybe with your whole board. That would be a good educational tool. I just want to make a quick plug before I wrap us up that our next board bootcamp session is going to be an in-person one right here at our Champaign Public Library. It is on strategic planning. So what is strategic planning? How do you go about it? Who's involved in the process? We have Joe DeLuce, who used to be with the Champaign Park District, and he's coming back with Vanessa Forey, who's out of the University of Illinois, presenting some best practices on how to go about strategic planning with your nonprofit organization. And I will send you out the link if any of you want to register for that live session in April. With that, I just want to say thank you, Wes. Thank you, Allison. We appreciate you for being here and sharing this information. And thank you to all of you for being here and for your service on our local nonprofit boards. We appreciate you. Our contact information at the Community Foundation is here. Please visit our website. We'd love if you'd follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, and LinkedIn would be great platforms to follow us on. And yes, I will send out this PowerPoint deck as well as the link to the recording following today's session. So thank you so much, and I hope you have a great rest of your LEAP day.